I'll be right back.
Unfortunately, this is reality.
There are very few shinobi within Naruto history that truly reach that rare air in terms of both raw power and the ability to effortlessly aura form. Itachi Uchiha and Minato Namikaze certainly are both in that rare air. In fact, since their infancy, both these characters were prodigal figures within the Hidden Leaf respectively, far exceeding the abilities of the vast majority of the shinobi of their generation. However, due to the prodigal talents both these shinobi possessed, they would be catapulted into positions of high responsibility and sacrifice, leading to both, unfortunately, experiencing death at a very early age, never truly reaching their physical primes. So with all these parallels in mind, who would win? The universally proclaimed god of Genjutsu, or the world-renowned Yellow Flash of the Leaf? Well, in today's video, we'll be going over the scaling, abilities, feats, and even psychological profiles of both shinobi, and then determining who would win between these two godlike shinobi. Please note that we will be utilizing the manga, anime, and data books when analyzing this matchup respectively. And with all that being said, let's jump straight into it. So due to Itachi's terminal illness, we will be scaling two separate versions of Itachi and giving two separate conclusions on who would win between him and Minato, one for each of these two versions, with these two versions being Sick Itachi, which is the Itachi we got in the original narrative, and a hypothetical Prime Itachi. So starting off with Sick Itachi, Itachi once in the Akatsuki was already a world-renowned shinobi with such skill and prowess that even a younger Obito was wary of him, to the point where he negotiated a deal indicating he saw him as a worthy threat. Now take what you will from that power scaling wise, but at the very least, it is highly likely that Itachi was relative to Obito at this time in terms of power scaling ability, at least with Obito's opinion of him. It became very clear that Itachi far surpassed the level of even the most prominent of shinobi, including the legendary Sannin, with him effortlessly fodderizing Orochimaru on two separate occasions, including when near death, with Orochimaru using his most powerful ability being his Hydra Snake form. And with Orochimaru being capable of essentially stalemating the third Hokage during the Konoha Crush arc, Itachi is far above any of the living Kage during his lifetime in terms of overall ability and prowess. In fact, he is so powerful, he was able to hold back in power when undercover within the Akatsuki and still make multiple shinobi of note, including Kakashi and Jiraiya, and truly believing he was a heartless, bloodlusted monster. With that being to our detriment, however, because when scaling him with his illness, while we can say he is far above the Kage of his time, due to him constantly holding back, it is nearly impossible to get a truly definitive measurement of his power. Hence, the best conclusion we can come to for Sick Itachi is that he was a top 3 Akatsuki member and one of the most powerful shinobi on Earth during his time. Now jumping to how powerful Itachi would have been if he actually reached his physical prime with no terminal illness, the closest we ever saw to that was him when reanimated. When reanimated, he was capable of reacting to and physically combating Keisamon Naruto and Killer Bee simultaneously, with only a base Sharingan, and was then capable of speed blitzing Nagato when broken free of the reanimation jutsu to save Naruto and Bee, of course. We then see him battle Sage Mode Kabuto alongside EMS Sasuke, carrying the fight to be frank, with him also holding back to not kill Kabuto, as he would need him shortly after defeating him to undo the reanimation jutsu. Hence, based on his feats as an Edo Tensei, it can be said that a hypothetical Prime Itachi would be similar in ability and prowess from a power scaling standpoint, as the reanimations were near the full power, as indicated by Edo Tobirama later during the War arc. So in fact, Itachi in his prime would have been slightly stronger than Edo Itachi, but of course would still be susceptible to fatigue and death, unlike the reanimations. This would put Edo Itachi above Keisamon Naruto level to at least a small arbitrary extent, which is widely impressive considering who Keisamon Naruto was able to defeat early on in the war and who he was compared to. Now when it comes to Itachi's abilities, they are quite versatile, with him possessing the infamous Tsukuyomi, which when implemented on an opponent, causes the opponent to experience perhaps the most complex and vivid genjutsu in the verse, where the created reality they are experiencing is solely dependent on the user, meaning Itachi can completely control the time and space that his opponent is visualizing and experiencing. Additionally, he possesses the Amaterasu, which is stated to be as hot as the sun and can only be extinguished in most cases by the user himself, explosive shadow clones, and of course his Mighty Susanoo, with it possessing the one-shot Tosuka blade, which seals anyone it comes into contact with, and the Mighty Yadomir, which can block essentially any attack from an opponent, making it basically indestructible. Lastly, when it comes to versus matchups, especially of this caliber, psychological profiles of those involved are important when determining who would win in an altercation. Now when it comes to Itachi's psychological profile, Itachi is famous for his stoic and noble character, essentially accepting the role of the sacrificial lamb or martyr for the greater good of the Hidden Leaf. This indicates his indomitable will when it comes to making uncomfortable decisions. Additionally, he is one of the most calculated and intelligent shinobi in the verse, constantly showing this trait during the multiple showings we see of him, including against Sasuke, Orochimaru, and Kakashi. Hence, when it comes to Itachi's will, there is no question that he would do whatever it takes to win the battle and complete the mission at hand. Now jumping to the Yellow Flash of the Leaf and getting into his scaling, Minato even from an early age displayed extraordinary abilities and levels of power. At just around the age of 14, after just mastering the Rasengan, he would go on to stalemate a restrained full 9 tails in a tailed beast bomb and Rasengan clash in Kushina's astral plane, which is wildly impressive considering the level of AP tailed beast bombs possess. In fact, he was so impressive in this encounter with Kurama that Kurama himself compared Minato to the first Hokage Hashirama Senju, which regardless of how you want to interpret that power scaling wise, is wildly impressive. Later in his career as an elite Jonin during the Third Great Shinobi War, he would single-handedly become a literal weapon of mass destruction on such a grand scale that he would defeat 1,000 stone shinobi, forcing the stone village to accept a peace treaty. And this, on top of the fact that he had a flee on sight order placed upon him, illuminates the fact that Minato as a shinobi was so capable and dangerous that he was considered a nationwide threat to the enemies of the Leaf, which only a handful of shinobi in history have ever been considered. But getting to the actual specificities of Minato's power scaling as a shinobi, his speed, both in terms of his movement speed and perception speed, can be said to be at least relativistic to the speed of light, considering he perceived and physically reacted to the 4th Hokage's full speed, with the 4th Hokage's speed being stated to be near the speed of light. Now as far as his AP and durability, we don't really get a grasp of what that is because again he is faster than anyone alive during his time, but the stalemate he had with Kurama and Kushina's astral plane indicates that with the Rasengan he has the AP necessary to level mountains at the very least, with the levels of destruction we have seen tailed beast bombs cause. Getting to Minato's abilities now, like Itachi, he possesses one of the most dominant and overpowering hacks in the verse, with that of course being the Flying Raijin. With this ability, he can instantly teleport to any location where there is a Flying Raijin marking he has previously placed. This ability, along with his high level of speed, essentially made him untouchable during his career, striking fear in his enemies. Aside from this, he possessed high proficiency in Funjutsu, aka Sealing Jutsu, thanks to the knowledge provided by the Uzumaki clan, which we see on display, such as when he sealed the 9 tails inside Naruto with the complex 8 trigram seal. He as well, of course, was a master of the Rasengan and Shuriken Jutsu, considering how cleverly he used that in conjunction with the Flying Raijin. Lastly, it's important to note that Minato was nearly a perfect sage, as we see him effortlessly use Sage Mode in the 4th Great Shinobi War, but he does state that he never used it in battle prior to this moment, resulting in him not being able to use Sage Mode for prolonged periods of time, according to him. And now jumping to Minato's psychological profile. Minato from his youth is a very calculated and intelligent shinobi, which aside from his physical abilities, is a huge reason why he became such a dominant force during his career. He maximized the potential of his abilities with high intelligence, resulting in some of the most clever and creative battle strategies, such as his elaborate and complex Flying Raijin Shuriken combos, which again made him capable of eliminating entire armies quickly and efficiently, single-handedly. It was clear that throughout his career, Minato carried a heavy sense of innate duty within himself to make his nation and the shinobi world a better place, being willing to even put his own life on the line, which led to his eventual noble death when saving the Leaf Village from the Nine Tails in Obito. Hence, his conviction and intelligence is up there with the greatest shinobi to ever live. So with all that being said, let's now jump into the matchup and see how it would most likely conclude, knowing what we know about each combatant. So starting off with Itachi versus Minato. Itachi would be at an immediate disadvantage due to his terminal illness, which would result in him not being at his full capabilities. Now, although we can't conclude even a vastly sick Itachi is still above Saiyan level, as evident by his feats, Minato in his prime was more than likely the single strongest shinobi on Earth as well as the fastest, being even compared to Hashirama in his youth. Hence, with all this in mind, it is more than likely that Minato would have the physical advantage in this matchup, resulting in Itachi having to depend on Hack's abilities to get the victory. If we presuppose both come into battle with the same level of preparation and in character, Minato's superior speed would allow him to even think faster, as his perception speed is more than likely superior to Itachi's as well. It wouldn't take him long to deduce the genjutsu threat that Itachi would present, and Minato would get out of his line of sight instantly using the Flying Raijin. And with Itachi not being known for his durability, he would truthfully be defeated with perhaps only one Rasengan, especially with Minato having the intention to at least incapacitate Itachi, similar to how he did Obito during the Nine Tails invasion. Now, while the theoretical possibility of Itachi defeating Minato does exist, it is simply the less likely outcome, as the physical gap is simply too great for Itachi to overcome. Not to mention his stamina would quickly dwindle as he attempts to damage Minato due to his continuous loss of eyesight and illness, of course. Hence, Minato would come out on top a solid 8 out of 10 times, with low to possibly mid difficulty if you want to give Itachi more generous high boss scaling. But now getting to the more interesting matchup, Prime Itachi vs Prime Minato. This matchup would only allow for a very small margin of error for both combatants. In terms of speed, both are much more comparable in this scenario, as Itachi is comparable to KCM Naruto and Prime Nagato, as his scaling earlier indicated. Minato is also comparable to KCM Naruto, as indicated by the Rikage, when Naruto outspeeds him at full speed, with the Rikage stating only Minato has ever done that prior. Hence, if we once again presuppose both combatants start the battle with equal levels of preparation, both have a good possibility of one-shotting the other, with Itachi possessing the Tsukuyomi specifically, and Minato possessing the Flying Raijin. Truthfully, I would deduce that Itachi is faster than Minato, at least in terms of movement speed, as only with the base Sharingan he was reacting to KCM Naruto in physical combat while reacting and combating B simultaneously. Hence, it seems that Prime Itachi reaches another tier of speed in comparison to Minato, who is more so implied to be KCM Naruto's equal narratively. But even regardless of that, perception speed is what will matter more in this battle, as whoever fires the trigger, so to speak, first wins. So just imagine a Wild West shoot-off with whoever firing the trigger first winning the battle. With that being said, I slightly lean in favor for Itachi, because Itachi does not even actually need to get close to Minato to defeat him, as he would simply need to glance at him to defeat him, whether that be via Tsukuyomi, Amaterasu, or some other ability. Minato requires more prerequisites to defeat Itachi, as he would need to actually get close to him to physically hit him with a Rasengan, defeat him via Funjutsu, or to just simply damage him in general, as he does not possess one-shot long-distance abilities that we know of. So while the Flying Raijin does grant Minato temporary instant speed during the act of teleportation, once he has teleported to a location, he would then have to rely on his actual combat and movement speed to successfully strike Itachi. I do, however, believe this matchup is closer than the previous one due to these two having much more comparable speed. Hence, I would conclude Itachi would win 6 out of 10 times with high to possibly extremely high difficulty. And there you guys have it, folks. That is the video. Feel free to, of course, let me know of any disagreements, future video recommendations, or general thoughts in the comment section below. Anyways, I hope you folks enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time. Stay classy.